morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the Crash MotoGP podcast brought to you by NordVPN. On the show today, we're looking back at an absolutely mega Australian Grand Prix, a fight all the way to the bitter end in MotoGP and more championship drama. A controversial Moto2 race 2 and the Moto3 title has been claimed. And so much more coming up over the next hour or so. The recording date is Tuesday, the 18th of October. My name is Harry Benjamin. Joining me as ever is Crash MotoGP editor Pete McLaren and former Grand Prix rider and British champion Keith Huewen. And well, Keith, let's start then with that race in MotoGP. An emotional win for Alex Rins and a last lap duel right to the end. The top 7 split by less than a second. And what a way for him to do it on that Suzuki as they come towards the end of them leaving MotoGP.
I mean, what a way to do it. I mean, it's perfect, isn't it? Their social media, by the way, is the best in the paddock. There's no doubt about it. Whoever it is at Suzuki that looks after the social media side of things is brilliant. And this is a headline absolutely made for it. We couldn't just leave, it said, which I thought was just a perfect way to sort of launch into the week's PR. You wonder what's going on at Hamamatsu. They must be sitting back there thinking, it's almost like the team has worked one right up their backsides in Hamamatsu, you know, and you'd want to, wouldn't you, in the circumstances, whether you're a rider, a team member or whatever it is, to be completely had the rug pulled out from underneath you. And then you go and win on probably, arguably, the best racetrack of the series, where a Suzuki works as well as it does. There couldn't be a better advert for Suzuki than winning at Phillip Island, really. And Alex Rins, I mean, you just don't know with Alex Rins, do you? I mean, he's had so many unforced errors, and then he gets this one absolutely smack on dead right. There are so many stories. As you said in the preamble, Harry, you've got, they call what used to be Honda hairpin, it's now the Miller corner. And of course, where does disaster come for Miller? It's at the Miller corner. You might have expected that. Always used to make me laugh where they called the Lorenzo corner was one where he got completely T-boned back in the day. You know, naming corners, it can be a very dangerous thing to approach at the end of the day. Quartararo, couldn't be a bigger disaster for Quartararo than what they had at Phillip Island. You know, you've only got to look at Zarco. Where on earth was Zarco this week? I mean, he was, I think, 12th on the opening lap or something along those lines, somewhere terrible. You know, it's such mixed fortunes on a racetrack that's really, really tricky. And yet we had, you know, better weather than we thought we were going to get. The lead up to the weekend wasn't particularly good, but we thought we were going to have absolute thunderstorms and wind and God knows what there, which is what you get at Phillip Island sometimes. And the weather was well, not perfect. It was far from perfect because of the wind that was there. But I mean, from a dry track perspective, it wasn't too bad, considering what we're going to get. So much to talk about. I better give Pete an opportunity.
Well, I mean, in fairness, Keith, I think it was you last week that called it, saying it was going to be the defining moment of the championship, Phillip Island. And you know what? It could well have been. We've got 2 races to go, and we've seen enough upsets, haven't we, in the last couple? But it does have that feel about it, doesn't it? After that mistake by Quartararo, really, I mean, 14 points on paper, you might say, well, you know, that's not that bad, 50 points to go, but it's the tracks that are left, isn't it? That really, he's up against it now. And as he said himself, it's the toughest job in his career he's facing now going into this weekend in Malaysia. He's got to win. That's what he's looking at it as. That's it.
Where the difference might come, though, of course, psychologically, defending a lead is a lot harder than actually chasing one down. I mean, I think the situation now, the roles have reversed somewhat, haven't they? Now the pressure's on Bagnaia to protect that points lead that he's got. And Quartararo, well, he can throw caution to the wind and just get on with it without having to think about anything at all. That's the theory. But you often hear journalists particularly say to racers, well, pressure's off now. You can enjoy yourself. But you're already at the limit, pretty much. You're already at the limit all of the time. You don't leave a gap. You don't leave anything on the table on purpose. So pretty much you're delivering whatever you and your bike are capable of delivering at that particular time, at that particular racetrack. So it will make no difference, I'm sure. You know, if Bagnaia's got an advantage in the last 2 rounds, then he's world champion. If Quartararo has, then we'll see. That's really where the muck's going to hit the fan. And I've got to say, I'm really looking forward to it. I mean, Quartararo has now got to ride the 2 races of his life to bring this back. And that's going to be brilliant for all of us.
The thing that stands out so much to me is how Fabio was 91 points ahead of Pecco after Germany, and now he's 14 behind. Just that switch around is just mental when you think about it, isn't it?
It's going to go into the books as a lesson, isn't it, to all young riders coming up. When we often talk about Michael Laverty and his academy. I bet old Michael Laverty's banging on about it. You should never give up. School race day. When you go to the school race, I always remember my now 19-year-old being beaten at the line because she relaxed 10 yards before the line. It's one. And I'm not a racing dad.
And I bet you've never let her forget it.
Where was the pit board, Keith? Where was the pit board?
But the lesson is there. The lesson is there in that you never, to your very last breath, you never let go of something. And I think that is, this year with Bagnaia, 91 points. It was done, wasn't it? The World Championship was won. Quartararo was going to be world champion. Go back, Danny Kent. Danny Kent only just held on to that, Britain's Danny Kent, only just held on to that Moto3 world title. The second half of the season, he was being hammered at every single round. Just about got it over the line in the end, held his nerve and was world Moto3 champion. There are stories you can go back over the years. I mean, I'm sure everyone can come up with one at least that's their favourite. And this is going to be one of those, isn't it, at the end of the year? If Quartararo capitulates in the way that he looks like he's going to this year, then, it will be that story forever. 91 points, that's nearly 4 race wins. Can't believe it.
I mean, Quartararo scored 8 points out of 100 in the last 4 races, isn't he? I mean, the other way of looking at this, of course, is that, if Ducati hadn't had those problems at the start of the season and Bagnaia hadn't made all these mistakes we're talking about, 5 DNFs, he'd have wrapped it up several races ago, wouldn't he? I mean, since the summer break, Quartararo's had 1 podium, the Aprilia have had a couple, haven't they? But really, it's all gone in the direction of Ducati, hasn't it? And really, it was those early rounds, those early mistakes, the first third of the season, that's given Quartararo and Aleix this chance. And, sadly, who would have thought it, as you say, well, I can't remember. Usually the champion has 1 DNF in a season, maybe 2. That's sort of it. And for all of these, the top 3 to have non-scored in the last couple of races, at least once, Quartararo's case twice, 3 times. Incredible.
Well, they better get it right because it's going to be their last chance to have an easy championship. Marquez is back.
You segue so nicely, Keith, onto that. I mean, how brilliant, though, is it to see Marc Marquez back up and almost back to his old self, it seems, or in fact, just a new version of himself, and especially having to save that bike as he did earlier on in the weekend, using the bad side, the bad arm. That is a big indicator, I think, and me and Pete were discussing it earlier off there, a big indicator showing, well, Marc Marquez can certainly, he's already on the podium, he can win a race probably before the end of this year, but next year, watch out for Marc Marquez.
He's like the evolution of man, isn't he, Marc Marquez? I mean, we've seen him go through so much. You felt like you've ridden alongside him quite often with all of this. And to go through what he's gone through and to not lose that absolute inherent talent, that determination, that you cannot save those kind of saves. To do it, 2019, I think, was the last time we saw him do it, and he does it again this time with that great big, front end under, ping it, turn his knee slider right round to the back of his leathers. You don't save them. I've ridden motorbikes all my life, and I think I've saved one, and I can remember exactly when it was because it was so remarkable. You can remember when that happened. It's kind of being etched on your brain. Bloody hell, how the hell did I save that? I have no real clue, whereas Marquez seemed to do it on cue. But the most motorbike racers, you just don't save them like that. You're down, and he does it again. With his arm now 33 degrees or whatever it is, twisted back into shape, is remarkable. And isn't the sport a better place, in my opinion? And I hope not too many people disagree with me here, because I just think it's a better place with Marc Marquez in it. It almost focuses everybody on their job. Not that they need focusing, because they're all bloody mad as hatters anyway and focused on winning races. But all of a sudden, when Marc Marquez there, it all moves up an extra level. It just goes up another level. It's incredible. Absolutely incredible.
And a clever decision running the soft rear tyre, the only guy on the grid to do that. I mean, he said it was a gamble, didn't he? And he makes it work. It just shows he's got that mental ability as well, hasn't he? That he can ride the bike on the limit and he's still got something extra. He only set the 15th fastest lap in that race, in terms of the ultimate speed. But he won it through being clever and knowing when to be fast, didn't he? Yeah, they should be worried for next year.
I would say so.
What was it, though, about Phillip Island, or was it the track, or was it the way they had to run the bikes that just allowed for that such close quarter racing? Because I think we can agree that this year, yes, there's been some brilliant races, but overall, 2021 was more action-packed and probably more entertaining to watch. But Phillip Island, that was a brilliant race. Why did we suddenly get that kind of racing?
I think that they hadn't finished with their evolution of testing and so on and so forth. Nobody really knew what they were quite capable of. It wasn't a particularly fast race, I don't think, from memory. I haven't studied the sheets like I normally do, but it wasn't a particularly fast race. So I feel that they're all coming from a lower benchmark than they perhaps were in the past, and kind of getting back in the swing of Phillip Island and its special little nuances that you need from a riding perspective. There were riders who did better than I thought they'd do. Alex Rins, of course, and the Suzuki. And there were riders who did horrendously bad compared with what I thought they'd do. And I mean, I think that, across the board, I think most people would have been like that. You couldn't have predicted what happened, surely. It was just, Alex Marquez, he's ended up with a penalty for he had a terrible weekend, Alex Marquez. He was down on the ground more times than I saw him anywhere else. It was just one of those Phillip Island race meetings. It is, when you travel that far, and it's kind of the back of beyond. You can't appreciate what it's like until you get there. The people that are at trackside are huddled, like they've got like their full winter gear on. It's like going to Alaska or somewhere to go and watch a race meeting. It is just unbelievable, the atmosphere that's there. These are hardened race fans. I mean, I think it was 91,000 people there over the course of the weekend, which was a big crowd for Phillip Island. They did well, considering that, campsites were flooded and unusable. Tracks that you'd normally walk down were blocked. It was not a sort of friendly place to go and spectate, but what a spectacle when you get there. And I think the riders were still getting used to that atmosphere right the way through the weekend. The press office is different from everywhere. The paddock is different from everywhere. Parking is awkward. You can't get your cars in. There's a tunnel to go off under the track that's run by pedantic, parking warden types. I mean, the place it's not an easy race. It's not an easy race meeting, believe me.
It's it certainly proved to be some brilliant racing. You mentioned there, Alex Marquez has got that long lap penalty to do for Malaysia for taking out Miller. He takes out Miller from the race at his corner, and that is now Miller's title chances officially over. So he's setting his sights on trying to get third in the championship. But Aleix Espargaro, while we're talking on title contenders, Fabio obviously out, Pecco now the leader. Aleix still in there with scoring points, but it just didn't seem to really threaten the front, Pete. He's now 27 points back from Pecco.
Yeah, he was really frustrated after the race. I mean, he set the second fastest up of the race. He was in that big pack that we've just been speaking about. But it sounds like, and he wasn't the only one, but it sounds like the Aprilia team just got their traction control settings a bit wrong. This was Phillip Island really hard on tyres. Keith previewed it last week. They'd never run exactly this type of tyre before. And I think some people erred on the side of caution. They were encouraged to do so. Just be careful here. Guys like Rins didn't, but some riders did. Marini was another one. So it was across different brands that felt that they didn't quite use up all of the tyre that they could have. But in Aleix and Maverick's case, it got to the last 8 laps and you can just see them start to drop down the field. The traction control was just too strong. It was just cutting the power out of the corners. And he was desperately frustrated. It actually ties in a bit with, I guess, the Suzuki leaving situation where Aleix was saying, look, the hardest thing in MotoGP is to have the speed to win. And they had the speed to win. He sat on the grid believing he had the speed to win. He's been 10 years in the sport, probably never had that before this year. He had the speed to win, just as in Motegi, or at least fight for it, and it slipped away through mistakes. And the reason I tied in with Suzuki is they've got a bike that can win, and they're scrapping it. What a waste. They've got this whole package, the riders, the team, everything. And in 2 races' time, it goes in the bin. There's people that would have been part of that winning team this weekend who won't even have a job in 2 races' time. It's just madness, really, that they're wasting what they have. Suzuki previously, they were in MotoGP with their earlier bike, the GSVR. I mean, it never really had the speed to win at all. They've now won 5 races and a world championship with this current bike. And you just think, what a waste. I mean, that's you can say, oh, well, it's great to go out with a bang, and it is. And I'm delighted for the team and the riders. But I just think my feeling is that, to put this package and that team, which is such a great team, in the bin, if you like, what a waste.
You know, I always like to make a Formula One analogy just because we've got Harry hosting us as usual. And it's just a shame we can't have a Brawn situation where Honda had done all the development and done everything and got their Formula One car to a really good position and then gave it to Brawn for £1 for Jenson Button to go and win the world title the next year. And it's almost like you would hope that we could do something like that with Suzuki. You know, they give the team to somebody that wants to run it and still give the factory backing, but perhaps not the commitment from the finance side of things. But there won't be a situation like that because we don't have the kind of money that Formula One has to do that kind of thing. But you're right, Pete. I think Suzuki are doing themselves more harm than good when it comes to their reputation. But when it comes to their book, at the end of the day, this has got to be a financial reason behind it. They've looked at it. They've decided that, you know, racing at MotoGP level has cost them millions and millions and millions of pounds, yen, over the last 5 or 6 years, and it's time to.
I mean, you know, when I've mentioned this to a couple of people in the paddock, I mean, whenever you mention the Suzuki decision, people just shake their heads and shrug their shoulders because, you know, on the financial side, they say, well, look, the bikes are not changing that much. Yes, it is expensive, undoubtedly. But, I mean, there's no big rewrite of these machines for next year. You know, it'll need a tweak on the aero, a bit on as Keith's saying, the bike is a winning package, a bit like Brawn. It doesn't need a redesign. I mean, it's already got it. You know, there's not vast amounts of money needing to be pumped in. And just a shame, isn't it? I mean, this EV thing they're all talking about with Suzuki. I mean, we saw in the past Fiat Yamaha, didn't we? Fiat came along and backed the MotoGP team. One of the most memorable brandings. They could have branded their MotoGP project with this electric, whatever. I don't even know what the electric car is from Suzuki. So there we are. If they branded their bike with it, or even an electric bike, they could have used that platform, kept it intact. Anyway, it's too late now. And
you touched on a very valid point. The fact is, rules wise, there is no major upgrades allowed at the moment. They have, you know, built into the system. Is it 5 years? I think it is before they can have massive changes. They can
before any major technical changes. Yes.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, you're absolutely bang on, Pete, bringing that up. And so Suzuki weren't going to be in a bad position. It's not like everybody had got these massive upgrades and new motors and new chassis and everything for next year. They haven't. So Suzuki, wouldn't it be good if you could ever get? We won't ever, and there will be nobody ever that will get an interview with anybody from the Hamamatsu board. That is for sure. But it would be great to understand the thinking behind this, or the lack of it, whatever way you want to look at it.
It is, I think Pete described it so well. It's a waste, it seems. And then when you have, as you said too, Aprilia, a bike that clearly can perform with a great lineup. If you were Aprilia, would you be looking at the people in Suzuki who are going to be out of a job at the end of the year and go, right, hang on, okay, there's clearly something maybe not quite right with the way our team is working. Aleix has called them out a couple of times, and he's even said we're not ready to fight for a title. We're just not there in terms of how the team operates. Do Aprilia then go, right, okay, let's try and pinch some people from Suzuki and see what we can make happen for next year?
Short answer to that has to be yes, doesn't it? I mean, at the end of the day, they're going to be looking. I mean, Rivola is no mug. He came across from Formula One. I don't suppose it's any coincidence that things have started to ramp in the upward direction since Rivola's been overseeing things at track level. But, you know, silly mistakes have snuck into Aprilia this year, and they're going to be beating themselves up badly about it. I mean, there are great teams around the world who have made mistakes. Aprilia just are going through that phase at the moment that they will dial out of it in the end. I mean, it's something that, okay, this year might not be the year that Aprilia wins the world title. This year might be the only year that there's really been one up for grabs. I'll say slightly easier than the past before, and they might be kicking themselves for the rest of their manufacturing lives that they didn't win the world title in this year, where it may have been fractionally, I really say this reluctantly, fractionally easier this year through other people's mistakes to grab a world title. Nobody normally gives away 91 points like has been given away to Ducati, and it looks like Ducati are going to capitalise on that, when Aprilia should have been in that position as well to have taken it to Ducati based on the fact that Bagnaia made loads of mistakes this year as well. But then Aprilia have made, as you've said, too many mistakes perhaps. And Aleix, wearing his heart on his sleeve, has said that, you know, they're not really ready for winning the world title. That's a fairly large smack in the mouth, because basically what he's saying is we're not well enough organised to win the world title. It's not that the bike isn't capable, because it obviously is.
And in fairness to Aprilia, they included that quote in the team press release. So, that gets signed off by someone quite high up, doesn't it? And obviously, it's only a small fraction of what was said. You can get a much more detailed description in the story on Crash. But for them to actually go, you know what? Yeah, fair enough. Fair point. He, as he said, 12 points in the last 3 races, and to fight for the world championship is ridiculous, was his words. But, as Keith said as well, the other guys have also made big mistakes. So he's being a little bit hard on himself, but I think Aleix is in a different position, isn't he? He's the oldest guy on the grid. He knows how rare it is to get these chances. And so for him to see it slipping through his fingers for reasons that, other than performance, let's say, is really frustrating for him. And just on the Suzuki thing, I think already the crew chief, Rinz's crew chief, Manu, is going to be Vinales' crew chief. So at least one senior member is going over there. I think Tom O'Kane, the test team crew chief, more than crew chief really, with Guintoli, he's off to Yamaha, I think. So he'll be a great asset for them. But, you can't fit all of the guys in Suzuki into other teams. So there will always be some people left out by this decision, sadly.
There is World Superbikes, of course. Remy Gardner moves across. There's more Grand Prix guys in World Superbikes than there's just about ever been, as far as I can remember, or certainly ones that should have been in MotoGP are now in World Superbikes. There are going to be opportunities, I suppose. The cream rises to the top. Management knows, who's what's what more than any of us do. I mean, we think we understand about it, but when you're on the paddock, dealing with the nitty gritty every minute of every single day, every second of every day, sleeping or otherwise, then you're across the guys that you think may be a good fit for your team. And you'll be, look at the schmozzles there was in the paddock when KTM came to the paddock and ripped off half of the Honda crew. All of a sudden people that, you're so used to seeing crew in certain colour jackets that all of a sudden it all swapped about, didn't it? We were all, oh, you're with KTM now. Oh, hang on a minute, you're the gearbox man from HRC. How come now you're the gearbox man over in KTM? The secrets and the knowledge that these guys have from each factory. I'm sure they have to sign off when they have a contract with the factory that there's NDAs, non-disclosure, agreements, and so on and so forth. But how the hell do you enforce that? Intellectual copyright and all the rest of it, it's out the bloody window when you've lost your man. The only way you keep them is by paying them for the next year to go on gardening leave.
Bit of gardening leave, yeah.
Yeah, or something along those lines. I've got a garden that needs doing by somebody that good. You can come around.
You
here
already had Pecco around for coffee. Yeah. Oh, I'm sure we can find somebody to do your gardening, Keith, at some stage. It will be you, yeah. It was all, so much happening, obviously, across the race. And the young guns doing quite well. Again, they were all on Ducatis, but if we look at Marco Bezzecchi, Enea Bastianini, Luca Marini, all getting really good results, 4th, 5th and 6th, Bezzecchi, Bastianini, Marini in that order, and Marco Bezzecchi securing Rookie of the Year in doing so. Yeah,
Bezzecchi looked a cut above, didn't he? He looked really, really good. I think, again, by not being on site, and I bloody hate it when I'm not on site and I can't go and have a little look in Parc Ferme and stuff like that. But from what I'm told and from what I understand, front tyres were a major issue. And towards the end of the race, quite a lot of them had tyres that were completely shot one way and another. I mean, we had a cracking lap, the fastest lap that we've ever had around there in qualifying. So that obviously the grip level of the track was there, but the longevity of tyres were definitely a problem.
And we talk about as well, sorry, Pete, just coming on to the other Ducatis, the Pramacs, Johann Zarco, what did happen to him? Because his teammate in the end, Jorge Martin, pole, leading the race for a while, in that lead gaggle too, ended up 7th, but he was still in that front pack, whereas Zarco was a few seconds detached, really.
Yeah, he was a bit like Bagnaia. He had a problem at the start with the whole shot device on the front. People might have seen Pecco sort of frantically twiddling all the devices as he rolled up to his place on the front of the grid, trying to get the front of his bike to lock down, and wasn't able to do so. I mean, and fair play to Pecco because he kept his cool. It could have been really stressful, and he didn't get away badly, did he? I think he lost a couple of positions. He was about 5th into the first corners, but immediately attacked Quartararo and got ahead of him, so he recovered quite well. To answer your question about Zarco, he struggled more. He just, same problem. The front wasn't down, so he got more wheelie, but he really got caught up in the pack and just lost loads of positions and fought back, but not quite close enough. Bastianini, he had his airbag go off in the early stages. He was down in 20th place. I mean, so to fight all the way back to 5th, a couple of tenths of a second off the podium in the win was pretty remarkable by him as well. So, all of the Ducatis were fast again, although, as Keith says, a lot of the riders, Bagnaia included, did struggle with the front tyre towards the end.
Well, they certainly did, and that has changed the championship order because Pecco Bagnaia, it is for the first time this season, isn't it, is now leading,
Ever.
right?
Ever.
Ever. Wow.
As far as I
so Bagnaia then with 233 points ahead of Fabio Quartararo, who is now on 219 points. So that 14-point gap at the top then, but the other way around with Quartararo now down to second. Aleix Espargaro still it. Enea Bastianini still technically, mathematically in it as well, up into fourth, as Jack Miller now rounds out the top five and out of contention. Marco Bezzecchi, as we say, with that fourth place finish. Best rookie of the year. He's currently 14th in the standings. The next best rookie all the way down in 20th with Fabio Di Gianantonio for Gresini, who had a bit of a weekend to forget, I think it's fair to say, for him further back. That was MotoGP. We'll come back to some more MotoGP chat shortly. I want to talk a little bit, though, about Moto2, if I may. It was Alonso Lopez who took a long lap penalty and still came out in front to win in Phillip Island. Pedro Costa on the podium and Jake Dixon third. Dedicated his performance to the late BSB rider Chrissy Rouse as well, which is a really nice gesture. But that heats things up in the title ever so slightly for Moto2. What did you make of all the action?
Brilliant strategy from your race winner. I mean, absolutely. I mean, to be able to pump those laps in really early on, it's harder to lead a race quite often than to chase somebody. And he just cleared off in the distance, gave himself enough of a gap to do the long lap penalty. And long laps are always a bit tricky as well because, that's a little bit dirtier down there. It's around the outside of the old Honda, now Miller hairpin. You've got to get that bang on dead right. You're approaching it downhill quite rapidly. And to tuck it in there and to come out back in front, we all went, wow, pretty impressive stuff. I don't think I've ever seen that done before where someone has managed to keep their position quite as neat and tidy as he did. It was well thought out. So there wasn't anybody else in the race, was there? He was going to be the winner, barring a silly mistake somewhere, but he had just the pace all the way through. Jake Dixon, great fighting performance from him again. I think he's cemented his quality at the top end of Moto2 at the moment. It's, he's not won a race, but, he's there. It's all but there. Will it come this year? Sepang maybe, will suit him, I think. Sepang is it's got some lovely corners on it. I can't wait to see who comes up top there. But I think Jake is there. He's world championship material. He's guaranteed what he's going to be doing next year. I'm really looking forward to a great 2023 for Jake. And, of course, now he'll be a dad by then as well, next year. So all these things mature a rider in a certain way and do a certain thing to your head. And I think he's going to settle in, really well with all of that element around him, that family element around him. He's not had it easy, Jake, on or off the bike. And he seems to have just found that level now that he's going to be a contender.
Well, that DNF, though, Pete, for Augusto Fernandez, if we look at the championship battle, means Ayagura is now the leader with his 11th place finish, seemingly making all the bit of difference. 3.5 points between them at the top. Agura, Fernandez, and then Cadet a little bit off, but certainly things looking spicy at the top.
Yeah, as you say, the half point is the short race in Thailand, isn't it, coming in? But yeah, it looked like, Fernandez was close behind his teammate Acosta in third. He looked like he was going to take big points on Agura, as you say, down in 11th and really struggling, and then just slid off. Really, costly mistake. On the other hand, as you say, it's only a couple of points difference, but there was a chance there because Agura didn't really look quick all weekend. I don't think it's ever been one of his favourite tracks, from what it sounded like, even during sort of practice and qualifying. He's never really excelled at Phillip Island, and it just sort of continued that way into the race. And he looked like he was going to be really on the ropes with Fernandez on the podium and him outside the top 10. And that's even with a lot of riders falling off. I think only 18 riders finished. There were a lot of people that that didn't finish. So it could have been a lot worse than 11th for him. So really, he got out of jail. And I guess Fernandez can also say, well, 11th place, it could have been a lot worse for me as well, making that mistake. But you could see from the way he was holding his helmet as he walked away, he knew that was a really great chance to get some proper breathing room between himself and Agura into these final 2 rounds.
Now, of course, Moto2 was not without its controversy this weekend, with a big incident involving Jorge Navarro, who fell directly into Simone Corsi's path when he low-sided on the exit of the Miller corner. He slid onto the grass, unable to move his legs, with the race then controversially continuing while marshals attended to him and carried him away on a stretcher. Keith, I mean, what did you make of that situation? Because I think a lot of people were just watching on and thinking, what on earth are they doing?
Well, I don't know. If you knew nothing about racing, you would still say, why are they still racing? You don't need to know anything about racing. Sometimes I wonder what gets into the head of race direction. I really do. BSB, British Superbikes, over here in the UK, tracks that are, sorry to say it to anybody who's listening and hates me for it, but are much more dangerous than Grand Prix tracks. Grand Prix tracks, a lot of science goes into making sure that we're at racetracks that are pretty much as good as you can get them. Okay, there are instances now with the pace that we've got, the tyres we've got, the handling we've got, where even some of the Grand Prix tracks now have got a bit too much furniture close to them, and they're reaching the barriers with the bikes and so on and so forth. But BSB are on traditional tracks in the UK that you would say, and if you like, Moto America as well, anybody that's raced or been to Moto America, you'll have seen that those tracks have got quite close barriers. But BSB, there's no way that race would have continued. In a heartbeat, there would have been a red flag. As soon as you've got a rider at trackside that's on the floor that clearly the marshals can't clear, he's badly hurt, he's bleeding as well. We've heard since that it wasn't a femoral artery that was bleeding, but he was bleeding profusely. He'd got exposed bone and all the rest of it, all the horrible gooey things that none of us want to think about as racers or spectators. But he was hurt, and clearly there should have been a red flag. Now, where was the system? This is something we've come to before. Again, if I talk about BSB, we have got the best world-class marshalling anywhere in the world. There's nowhere better than British Superbikes. Under MSVR, Johnny Palmer's mob, Stuart Higgs, of course, race director, series director, who really is the instigator of all of this, going back to the Race Safe Marshals Association and so on. We have got the best in the world, but we don't get that at every racetrack. You're using localized marshalling, localized systems, maybe even localized language for all I know. I did an interview with one of the Race Safe Marshals this year, and she was very kind in bringing me up to speed on what the differences are between different tracks, different world standards, if you like, of marshalling, and some are horrendous in comparison. Now, whether there was no communication between the marshals on the stand and the race direction, I don't know. I don't know what the reasoning is behind it, but there shouldn't be a reason. It should have been, we need to call this race, we need to stop this race right now. Because we've got a rider in trouble and we've got marshals exposed to flying objects. You only need one more guy to come down and side the legs off you, and away you go. The possibilities of it. You see the same thing in Formula One again. I mean, you guys seem to like tractors on the track. Even when we got Jules Bianchi, who was killed under a tractor going back to Japan, and this year you've got a tractor on the track again in virtually the same circumstances. How does this happen? Who is it that is stupid enough to not realise how dangerous this is for the corner workers, let alone the rider who's already injured? The last thing he needs is another motorbike on top of him. I don't understand the thinking, and I don't understand why we're even discussing it. It shouldn't even be something we need to be talking about. It should have just been an automatic, guys on the floor, marshals call through. It's quite a long lap as well, Phillip Island. It's not like sort of, minute and a bit. There's a bit of time for thinking about what's going on. There's a bit of time for making that communication, and somehow it isn't made. And I truly don't understand why. I mean, I haven't actually tried to get hold of anybody at Race Direction this week, because I've been here before where I've tried to understand what's gone on, and honestly, you can't repeat sometimes some of the comments that are made, the way the decision is made. It's So I haven't been able to get hold of anybody. I haven't tried to get hold of anybody this week to find out what the thinking was behind it. But clearly it was wrong, and they need to look at themselves regarding that.
Yeah, I mean, Keith said it all there, isn't it? I mean, it was hard to fathom, wasn't it? Just looking at the images, whether were they receiving conflicting information, from the scene? Who knows? We don't know. We haven't heard. There's been no, sometimes with penalties and things like that, we get an explanation now of why decisions are made, why certain things happen. As far as I'm aware, there's been nothing, to sort of explain the sequence of events here and why there wasn't a red flag thrown with a serious injury like that, as broken leg like that, hit by another bike, and just the images of guys riding close to that to Navarro on the ground with the marshals stood next to him. It was scary stuff, wasn't it? And it's hard to understand, as he says. It's hard to understand what happened there, why it didn't get stopped.
Well, as at the time of recording, the most recent update posted to Navarro's Instagram, it says, "Hello, everyone. After yesterday's accident, thank God Jorge is fine. His leg has already been operated on. Now we have to see how he recovers and when he can come back home. We also hope that Simone Corsi recovers well." Corsi, who suffered a finger injury, wrote on social media, "I'm sorry I couldn't avoid Jorge Navarro, but I wish him well to recover and get back in the saddle soon. I'll definitely have to have plastic surgery on my pinky finger and hope to recover as soon as possible." And of course, Navarro, who's a double Moto3 race winner, 10 podiums in Moto2, joins World Supersport Championship next season. So we wish him the best in his recovery and preparation for that. But certainly a controversial time in Moto2. Is it worth now bringing up this subject? I know it was raised in MotoGP, but this idea, Pete, it's the latest Crash.net article as well, about this little button that they can press if they believe should be a red flag. Now, I know that's more instigated in terms of the conditions on the track, but I imagine for this type of scenario as well, it could prove quite useful.
Potentially, yeah. I mean, this sort of came out over the weekend with Luca Marini explaining that the riders had spoken about it in the safety commission, and it's an option because only the riders know, don't they? It's the riders. They're on the bike. They're the only ones that really know the danger they're facing. And at the moment, we don't get to hear, race direction, most important, they can't hear from them. They can hear from the marshals and everybody doing their best to try and understand the conditions on the track. But at the moment, other than someone raising their hand a little bit or something like that in a race situation, there's no way for the race direction to actually know should it be stopped or not. So I think it's it makes sense that, the technology, it seems, is there now to allow communication from the bike to race direction, not just the other way around. And the worry is that maybe a couple of people might, if it was only down to a couple of people, it might sort of swing the decision. But it sounds like it would be 80%. Those sort of figures would need to sort of agree. Well, if you've got 80% of the riders agreeing, that's probably the best you'll ever get with any riders agreeing on anything. So, if 80% of the riders say it's too dangerous, then I think you're pretty sure it's too dangerous. So I think it's a good idea, and let's hope it's brought in pretty soon.
Might be like a game of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Fastest finger first. Whoever gets in there first gets a prize, perhaps, or something along those lines. Joking apart, of course, it's a great idea. It makes absolute sense. I mean, Pete alluded to it just there. I mean, the old one used to be when you pass the line, if 5 riders or whoever it was, I can't remember the actual number, put their hand in the air, then that was an indication that we had some consensus from riders on the bikes. Hopefully we never go back to a system like that again. But the 80% scenario, yes, because that negates the gamesmanship that you're going to get. If you're in the lead, of course you're going to be pressing that red button. If you think the race is going to come to an end prematurely and you're going to be awarded the win, I'd be on the bloody thing like this, pressing it for all it's worth. So you are going to have that kind of gamesmanship situation. But race control need to know. They're not feeling what's going on the bike. Freddie Spencer, despite the fact I've got a huge amount of respect for him, although it wouldn't be his responsibility to call a race off like this. But somebody like him in race control will have a feel for what's going on, but not clearly like you do as a rider. You can feel and anticipate stuff when you're on a bike so much more than anybody can see looking in. Even the cameras looking in, you can't tell how much that bike is actually moving underneath the rider or how slippery it feels and so on and so forth. Or the visibility, which is an issue that we've talked about so often. Visibility is a nightmare in spray and so on. And so it's a good idea. And for the pennies it costs, I mean, it really isn't an option. It needs to be there full time from next year, no question.
Yeah, myself and Harry, when we speak about it earlier, we're actually saying it's probably better than the Formula One system. Obviously, the Formula One, they can talk over the radio, but then you can get quite emotive sort of language coming in, can't you? This is a lot clearer, yes or no, dangerous or not. And as Keith says, it's situations like spray, Phillip Island, things like high wind. I mean, very difficult for someone in race direction sitting in a building to know what the wind's like, down by Siberia or Turn 1 or somewhere like that. So,
do you know what?
Good move.
That's a really good point, Pete. I mean, I remember commentating on a race once, and Kevin Schwantz kept coming out at Donington Park on the coppice, is it? That comes onto the back straight under the Dunlop Bridge that was there back in the day, out of coppice, and he kept going onto the grass. I kept thinking, I couldn't fathom what was going on, but he got so much wind that was whipping across there. In the end, we guessed it, but it was one of those situations where you couldn't work out why he was running out. You don't know. You can sit there watching telly all day long in your upholstered chair, but actually on a motorbike that's trying to kill you most corners because the wind's getting underneath you. So I think that as I said, for the pennies it costs, the only question you got to ask is why has it taken so long? Obviously, technology's had to catch up a little bit, but they've been playing with these sort of onboard systems over the last year. But this one seems to be a no-brainer. It's almost too simple. That's why it's taken so long.
Yeah. If Keith could come up with it, it's almost way too simple. Right. Well, if you want to read the full article and see all of the inner workings of how that might work, I think it was Luca Marini who was talking about it a lot over the weekend. You can head to crash.net for all of that and more. But now, just a quick interruption to the show because we're now delighted to be sponsored by the wonderful people at NordVPN. If you like us, and whenever you leave your country and get frustrated that you can't watch certain things because they're not shown wherever you are, NordVPN is what you need. It allows you to switch your virtual location to a country that is showing what you want to watch. And yes, that includes MotoGP, World Superbikes, BSB, and more. So now, wherever you are in the world, you'll never miss out at watching live motorbike action again, or just your favorite program. You can grab your exclusive NordVPN deal by going to nordvpn.com/crashmotogp to get a huge discount off your NordVPN plan and 4 months for free. It's completely risk-free with your personal information encrypted with the highest security protocols. And if you're not happy with anything, there's Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. So what are you waiting for? Grab your exclusive NordVPN deal by going to nordvpn.com/crashmotogp to get a huge discount off your NordVPN plan plus 4 months for free. And while you go off and do that, we're going to talk about Moto3 because it was all set to be wrapped up this weekend, the title. And Izan Guevara did just that, didn't he, Keith? Becoming the 2022 Moto3 World Champion after winning out in a tough four-way battle for victory.
Yeah, class, wasn't it? There's nothing like winning a world title and winning the race to win the world title. That's... I mean, I can't say much more than that. I mean, he looked like the kid that was going to do the business. He did the business at a place like Phillip Island. I mean, it doesn't come any better. I've got to say that I've seen much harder fought Moto3 races at Phillip Island than that one was. Normally you've got 15, 20 motorbikes that are all going for it, and any one of them could win by the end of the race. But on this occasion, Guevara, world champion, well-deserved, great ride, great year. Wait to see what he's capable of next year.
That's it, up to Moto2, isn't he? Jake Dixon's teammate. Only 18, CEV champion, I think, a couple of years ago. So he's added this to his CV now, and just impressive, as Keith says. I mean, got a little bit roughed up, I think, on the first lap, went back a bit, but put it all behind him and no nerves at all, and away he went and fought for the win and did it. So yeah, a really impressive, a guy with quite a future ahead of him, you've got to say.
His last lap was absolutely superb. I mean, there was lots of obviously speculation as to whether you lead onto out of that last corner. It's a fast left-hander out onto the last corner. But he absolutely nailed the last lap. Inch perfect, millimetre perfect, in fact, everywhere. Got the gap that he needed out the last corner. Nobody had a chance to slipstream him to the line. So it was a very, very mature. And you're right, he was junior world champion. Now he is senior world champion, if you like. And I think it's going to be a great team next year. You know, those two side by side. You've got the the humour and the maturity of now. I say maturity. Did I just say maturity about Jake Dixon? Hang on a second. I take that back immediately. The slightly older Jake Dixon then in that case, who's going to be a great teammate to be around, because there's not going to be tension in the team, that's for sure. It's going to be a happy kind of environment to go. So I think that it's going to be a very good year for him next year.
We should probably just mention as well, Rory Skinner. He's got the ride now, hasn't he? So that's and a 2-year deal it seems. So that's it's good for him.
Yeah, John Hopkins obviously managing him. They've been looking after him a little while. His mum and dad have stepped back a little bit, I think, and let Rory move forward. I mean, Rory probably is, even though he's only 20 now, but he's probably a year later than where he should be at this point, because if you remember, the Talent Cup thing held him back a little bit. He didn't get the ride. He won the Talent Cup. You can't do any better than that, but they didn't give him the prize effectively. So he's really probably a year behind what he was aiming to be. But all the same, he's still the right age, and it's a good team that he's going to be with. Got some good people in there, and I'm really looking forward to see Rory Skinner move on up. He's one of those kids. I mean, he's had a couple of knocks here and there, and it doesn't seem to have affected him really. I mean, he didn't quite get the team ride that he was hoping he was going to get at one point. Then he went back to Supersport and absolutely annihilated everybody in Britain on a Supersport bike. Moved back up into Superbike, which again in Britain is not an easy class. It really is not. There's some very, very quick riders here, and so Rory's looked very, very good. I'm looking forward to seeing what he's capable of next year. I mean, the Brits are coming, aren't they? At the moment, we've got them all over the place.
Well, we spoke about it earlier. The British system has not been great for a while, has it, in terms of producing the next bit of young talent? So it's good to see these coming through. But
not bad with the old talent as well, though.
Well, this is what I want.
Yamaha man was looking quite good this weekend.
Yeah. Cal Crutchlow, he's doing all right, isn't he? It's not been a terrible comeback for him at all.
It's been brilliant.
But I did want to talk. It's been brilliant, but I wanted to talk just quickly on the young guns. And actually, was it me or was it Marc Marquez being quite feisty off the track in terms of what he was talking about? Because he was saying things like, oh yeah, it's great to see Guevara doing well, but I've got to be I'm wary because that's my competition coming through. And even talking about Alex Rins, who's joining, of course, the Honda fold next year. Are you going to give him any advice? No. Why would I bother doing that? I'm not doing that. He can find out for himself. I thought he was being quite feisty on and off the track.
Well, I think that's the side of Marc Marquez that you don't normally see publicly. I mean, he is quite good fun, isn't he? I mean, you don't hear, he's a player. He's good fun on and off the bike in most circumstances. And these guys are really friends of his. They're guys that he's played with over the years. But I think that the key has always been with Marc Marquez. He does stuff on a motorbike that no one else can do. No one else has been able to do it. His data is absolutely unique to him. It's been I always remember Cal saying this while we were mentioning Cal Crutchlow. He can go and look at his data anytime he wants. The data is there, in the Honda camp as it is, but no one could actually use it to any real advantage because only Marc could ride a motorbike like it was. And so I think that the fact is he's loosened up a little bit. Before, you wouldn't see him if he wouldn't show pain, he wouldn't show emotion. It was all part of the Marquez way of going about his business. He's had to show pain at some stage because he's been in so much. He's had to admit that he isn't the machine that we all thought he was. He is actually human, and he does need his arm pointing in the right direction to be able to ride a motorbike properly, so on and so forth. I think there are certain things that Marc has learned about himself in these last couple of years that now he's even more, which I think makes him even more dangerous. The fact is now he's got over all those what's the words I'm looking for? He's got over the situation that he felt he had to be like, that he had to not show people any fallibility at all. He's got over that now. Now he's kind of relaxed, and I think you saw him dancing and singing earlier on. He was dancing in pit lane. I mean, blimey, I never even knew he could dance really, not in public anyhow. And then he was singing on the mic, wasn't he? And he said he didn't know the mic was open, but I don't believe that for one split second. I think he knew it was open, and he was having good fun with it. He's too smart to not know a mic's open. So it's kind of a Marc Marquez that I think suddenly other people we're all seeing that personality now. I mean, I think that when we've been around the paddock, when you live in the paddock, you see Marc Marquez in a slightly different way than what he is publicly. And I think we're now seeing an even more, fully rounded Marc Marquez, someone who's prepared to show a little bit more emotion, to show a little bit more, reality in what it takes to be him. And I reckon that's a great thing. I mean, Marc Marquez as a rider and with a personality, imagine where that can get him in 2023.
And of course, he's just changed manager. Is this part of the new Mark? Let's say, Emilio Alzamora did so much for him, but a very quite closed off character, wasn't he? And they obviously felt a change was needed. Is this, his new management is saying to him, look, Mark, be yourself. If you want to do something, do it. Also, the age thing, isn't it? He's coming up for 30, I think, and he's not the young guy anymore. He's always been the young guy pushing the old guys and making them uncomfortable. Now he's got all this pressure from guys like, Guevara in a few years maybe, but other guys already now that are younger than him. So those two things combined. But yeah, I mean, it's great to see Mark back on form and look forward to this contest of the new guys trying to take him on next year.
And to come back to Cal Crutchlow, he scored 3 points finishes, I think, and that's already half of what Dovi had managed to achieve too. And he's beaten Darren Binder in every race so far. So there is certainly still some fights in the old dog just yet.
Don't doubt Cal. Don't doubt Cal. Never doubt me.
Do it at your peril. Now, unfortunately, it has been an emotional and sad couple of weeks in motorbike racing, and unfortunately that did continue again in the last week with the sad passing of Victor Steeman, who suffered injuries and then succumbed to those injuries in a World Supersport 300 crash in Portugal last weekend, just 22 years old. So our thoughts, all of us here at Crash, are with his family and friends. It's such a difficult time, and it's highlighting again talks of safety issues, particularly in the support classes, Keith, and Maverick Vinales, whose own younger cousin died in the same category last year, had some very choice words to say, particularly about the Supersport 300 category and the bikes they're using as well. And he saying fundamentally it's the bikes that are the problem here and they need to change.
Yeah, deep breath with this one. I mean, Victor Steeman, that's tragic enough. And then his mum passed away shortly afterwards. I cannot imagine. They seem like lovely people. I don't know them personally at all, but one or two people I know them, and how on earth do you recover from something like that? I couldn't imagine it. I've discussed it here with my wife. You just would be beside yourself, and you would want to try and make it as safe as you could. But it's so difficult for me to sit here and try and rationalize how that will happen. Certainly mechanically you will be able to do something. There've been talks about changing the gear ratios to make it harder and so on and so forth. But what's happened is that motorcycle racing is a victim at Grand Prix level and the like, or certainly in the small bikes, of its own success. The formulae that have been produced to make great close racing means you are getting just that, great close racing. In the old days, you would have bikes that differed greatly. You would have tyre allocations that would differ greatly. You would have, factory parts that were put on some bikes and not on other bikes, so therefore they'd be 5 miles an hour quicker or whatever it is. So it had a natural, order, if you like, in the mechanics of the whole thing. But now that everyone's riding the same motorbike effectively, and even what you can do with those bikes is limited in performance values to keep them close together. Of course, everybody wants close racing, but when you've got situations like this, it makes you question that. How do you go about making it not close racing? It's almost the complete opposite to what we've all worked towards for the last 20 years, 30 years. I'm really struggling to work out how you can make it much better. You are always going to have incidents where the fact that racing motorcycles is dangerous is emphasized. And I think that this last couple of weeks, Chrissy Rouse, horrible incident. I go back to a very good friend of mine, Craig Jones, who had a very similar incident, was collected by a bike from behind. And it's terrible. But incidents like that are very difficult to legislate against. When it comes to the smaller machines, yes, I can see how they're getting tangled up, and we've talked about how that might be able to try and spread them out a little bit. But how do you do that without going back to a situation where you have a disparity in all the motorcycles, and then all of a sudden you've got a completely different situation in the paddock where the most money buys the best bike, or the best factory team get the best riders, so they are out front by miles, and we suddenly have races where you've got lapped riders, and then you run into a whole scenario then of lapped riders. Are they a danger? Do we have to take lapped riders out of it if we go back to the bad old days of where races were spread out a lot more? It is an absolute nightmare to try and work their way through this, and I don't envy anybody. There are some brains out there that will be working on this, and there should be a working committee that should be, discussing the mechanical, electrical situation that might be able to alter the situation that we're in. But close racing is close racing, and there are mistakes within that. Now, maybe it's an educational thing. Maybe riders that are involved in these things, maybe the penalty situation for weaving or for taking other people's braking lines and stuff like that becomes even more draconian. That's the way I think it will end up having to go, purely and simply because. But we've had draconian penalties before where you start from the back of the grid or whatever, and no one takes any notice. They all do exactly what they do. So it's going to be probably just on an educational thing. I can't see how you can make the racing worse, because the safety angle of it is always going to be very similar. Close racing is going to be a situation where there is a possibility of somebody going down. Look at what happened. We talked about it earlier on with Navarro. Navarro getting run over in the middle of the track. He broke his leg badly, but it could have been worse. Or he might have got run over and been perfectly okay. I mean, how do you legislate in those situations to be able to come up with a formula that protects all of the riders, particularly the young riders, of course? I mean, I think that's the other thing. When, for some strange reason, I mean, a life is a life, whether it be a young life or an older life, that makes no difference to me at all. But the fact is that how do you make that work better for all out there? I mean, being a commentator is much easier than being an official at the moment, with this lot in the back of your mind, trying to work out how you are going to come up with some kind of formula that's going to suit all and give us what we all want at trackside, close racing.
So difficult, isn't it, as you say, Keith? I mean, we're seeing the age limits coming in. We hear about these automatic accident alert system that they're developing, that kind of thing. I mean, Vinales is saying that it almost sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it? That actually by making the bikes faster and more difficult to ride, it'll actually make things safer in terms of less group racing. And but then, as you say, Keith, people want to see close racing. That's what people tune in for. And the riders want to be involved in close races as well, don't they? His concern was basically that because of the power to weight ratio is quite low, that as long as you're in a group and in the slipstream, you get pulled along with everyone else. And he was comparing it to when he came in, which was on a 125 two-stroke Grand Prix bike. He said it was so hard to ride that you couldn't do that. But again, it's as Keith was explaining, you then get some people that can ride the bikes pulling away, and you get racing that isn't as interesting, and maybe people feel they don't have a chance of winning when they go to the grid. So difficult, isn't it, to try and work out? It's one thing when there's racetrack design, there's walls, there's runoff areas, things that you can measure and increase. But when it's these multi-bike accidents, which is what we're talking about here, isn't it? It's so difficult to know how to get rid of them. They're always going to be there in some shape or form, aren't they? Sadly,
I think that you have to look at each and every accident in context. I think the problem is it's too easy to say that that's because they're young, that's because they're racing too closely, because quite a lot of these accidents have got nothing to do with that. It's a situation where luck has been against the situation, and I think that getting it in context is very, very important, and not having a knee-jerk reaction to it is very important as well. I mean, it's for me, it needs to be a bit more scientific than emotional. And let's work our way around it. There are going to be things that you can do, adding weight penalties, adding electronic penalties. You can add an electronic penalty if someone has been, created some kind of situation, weaved in a straight line or whatever. Take 200 revs off him. There are situations electronically that are really, really easy to manage and really, really easy to legislate for. But changing a class, I think is not the way to go personally, even though it is very tragic and what we're talking about is very serious. But I think you have to deal with a situation that you see if a rider regularly or even once, if a rider weaves 200 revs off, does it again, another 200 revs off, he will be backwards then. He won't be in amongst all of that lot to cause chaos anymore, because knocking a couple hundred revs off of a Moto3 bike is going to kill it. And I think that for me is really the probably the best way, as I see it at the moment, in my more of a layman's term, if you like. I'm not au fait with whatever else is available electronically or otherwise for organisers, for race direction to penalise these guys with. Back of the grid, long lap penalties. It's great for the spectacle. We had a winner from a long lap penalty. We've had it before. It's great to watch someone having to fight their way through the field. If anything, it might exacerbate the whole thing. He's got a long lap penalty. He's been dropped to 10th place. Now he's going to fight his way through like a lunatic to get back to the front again. I just think that electronic penalties are the way to go.
Well, let's absolutely hope measures are done and changes made. We can only hope, and we'll keep you abreast of what things are done as they happen on Crash.net. But our thoughts, of course, with Victor Steeman's friends and family, particularly, of course, with the sad passing of his mum as well. So a tough few weeks in the motorbike world.
Indeed, and this weekend, for anybody that's got a weekend out for motorbike racing, we're all up at Mallory Park this weekend to support Gino Rea, who had that terrible accident and obviously needs some rehabilitation. He's back in the UK now. Mallory Park, it's the race of the year, and they're going to supply some of the ticket money to Gino's rehabilitation fund. I'm up there. Steve Parrish is up there. Race of the year winners, past and the like, are up there as well. Troy Corser is joining us, so that will be hectic to say the least. But I think everybody's getting behind the Gino Rea fund, and if you feel like coming up and supporting it, then we'd be more than happy to have a beer with you. We'll be there all day long, and looking forward to helping Gino in any way that we can.
Oh, sounds amazing. What a brilliant cause as well. So get yourself there if you can, if you're free this weekend. But of course, it is a busy weekend, isn't it? Because we've got Malaysia. We're back in Sepang. No rest for MotoGP. I love this track. It's so annoying it's not in Formula One anymore, but I love the MotoGP Malaysia track.
Yeah, it's one of those tracks that actually suit both disciplines, isn't it? I mean, there's a couple of things that we'd like different from a MotoGP point of view, but I've got to say, I love going to Kuala Lumpur anyway. I mean, the airport is 15 minutes from the track. You wouldn't think so trying to get out of the track to get back to the airport in the evening if you're trying to do it in a hurry. But the point being is that it's a great racetrack. It has got some fantastic corners on it as well, providing it doesn't rain. Because it absolutely monsoon weather. That's the worst weather I've ever seen anywhere. I mean, Thailand has its fair share of it because obviously it's a similar kind of weather pattern. But Malaysia seems to have the worst I've ever seen, and the track copes with it. I can't believe how 5 minutes afterwards the rain has run off and we've got a track that's raceable again. But it's a great racetrack, great atmosphere. Fans at trackside, they go mad, and it's one of the rare racetracks that did away with Formula One in favour of MotoGP, it seems. I mean, they went big on MotoGP. Of course, the CEO back in the day was Razlan Razali, who used to be CEO of the Sepang International Circuit, and then now obviously is the Yamaha independent team boss now. And he's broken away from Sepang, if you like. He's no longer the Sepang International Circuit sponsored Yamaha team as it was with Petronas back in the day. So there's quite a link there as well. I don't think it's going to give him any advantage, by the way, come the weekend. I don't think that we're going to see Cal Crutchlow on the podium. Or maybe we will. Who knows with Cal?
It's, I think I've speaking to some members of some team members at a Sepang test. They said, you know what, this is the place we've been to more than any other racetrack in the last 20 years. Because when you add up all of the tests and the races, it's like a second home. As Keith says, it's probably easier to get to Sepang than it is to some European tracks door to door. You can jump on a plane, you jump off at the airport, and you're 15 minutes from the track. So it's a venue that's well known for everybody in MotoGP. They like coming there. It's familiar. It's exotic, but familiar, you might say. And the track itself throws up the challenges, and the weather, as Keith says, it looks like maybe thunderstorms in the afternoon all weekend again this weekend. So that will keep everyone on their toes with a title potentially to be decided.
For a spectator's point of view, if you fly into KLI, obviously KLIA, I think it is, fly in there's 2 airports, but the main international one is closest. The main entrance to Sepang is like this triangle. You've seen it before, those great big like brollies over 2 major straights. And it's like a triangle. And it's full of all sorts of fantastic vendors and the like, all the way down to food or goodies or whatever. So you come in the main entrance and you can cross over the bridge either side. And it's a very accessible racetrack from the point of view that there always seems to be a lot of fans around the entrances and stuff where you bump into your rider, your favourite riders, and you always seem to see everybody at Sepang. I don't know how they design the paddocks and the fan areas, but there's always something somewhere to do. And even from a working perspective, the back of the pits are really, really hospitable. They've got nice trees you can stand under and have your meetings. I know this sounds very exotic because it is. It's a great place. It has a great atmosphere, I think, Sepang, and may it do well. And the country as well. I mean, if you're into the wider thing, I mentioned the downside of it, which is all the palm oil trees everywhere, which is a shame. Poor old gorillas and monkeys and stuff have cleared off somewhere else now. But the actual country itself is very hospitable. It's a nice place to be. Kuala Lumpur it's not as frantic as Bangkok, which for me is a downside because I like Bangkok. But for Kuala Lumpur itself, it's very, very. It's got both sides of culture that you kind of like to dip into now and again. Transport links are really, really good. Trains everywhere, so you can stay in Kuala Lumpur and get a train up to the airport and then a taxi from the airport to the track. I said already, it's only 15 minutes around the corner, so it's not an expensive track. So you can actually stay in the city centre. There's a train that runs every 30 minutes, I think it is, even more, I think, during race weekends. It goes direct from the centre of Kuala Lumpur up to the main international airport, get off it there, get in a taxi. I think there's shuttle buses or whatever around to the track itself. Or you can live nearby if you want to. I mean, there's real budget hotels as well. Me and Hodgie, because we wanted to stay close by at one time, we sort of broke away from the rest of the BT team back in the day. They stayed in Kuala Lumpur and drove up every day, which added like an hour each way to your trip if you want to drive in from the city. So me and him stayed in a really budget hotel where the shower and the bed and the toilet and everything was in one room. It was about I think it was about £8 a night or something we stayed in, which was great for the 3 or 4 days that we did it. But we'd had enough by the time we'd showered all over our bed and wetted our toilet rolls and suitcase was full of whatever. So it was. But there are really, really good budget places right on top of the track as well, if you fancy that.
And they say motorsport isn't glamorous. It is. That's a hell of a picture to paint, isn't it? But crucially, prediction time, form guides. What we thinking? Top 3? Because I tell you what, no one scored any points for Phillip Island. No one got anything.
That's a good thing. That just goes to show you how great MotoGP is when 3 pundits don't get anything.
Absolutely zero. Although I do remind you, you have both still got Fabio Quartararo locked in as your title, but I went for Aleix. Right, well, let us know as well before we get into it your predictions too. Top 3s in the comments below, please. We always enjoy reading them. Who wants to go first this week? Who's ready? I'll tell you what, I'm going to go first because I've already written mine down. I'm going for a Marc Marquez win. I'm laying that down right now. A Marc Marquez win, a Pecco Bagnaia second, and an Enea Bastianini third. I think that's a strong podium.
I think you've matured, Harry. I think you've matured quite well.
I'd like to think there's still a bit of sporting bet element in that as well, but we'll see. Right, who's ready? Keith or Pete? Who wants to go?
I think Marquez is a great shout. I'm going to have him in the top 3, definitely.
Yeah, I was going to say I've got him third.
Oh, okay.
And then I've got Rins second.
Yeah.
And I've got Bastianini first. Now, Bastianini in the test earlier this year, he broke the unofficial lap record, if you like. So I'm sort of a bit swayed by that. But obviously, 1 lap and a race distance are 2 different things. But he was fast again in Australia. I don't think tyre wear will be such a big thing this weekend. But no, I'm going to go for him. So I'm not putting any of the title guys on the podium.
So hang on, wait. The first test that Suzuki had at Sepang. And I remember I got the pictures in my phone of the bike. I remember thinking it was the prettiest MotoGP bike I'd seen in a long time. It was beautiful. So I think Rins is a really good shout as well. But the trouble is, I can't go with the same as you. Otherwise, we're not going to have any bloody winners, are we? Out of the three of us. I'm definitely going to have Marquez in there just because I think he'll be top three. So I'm going to go with Marquez. Blimey. Bagnaia and Quartararo.
Wait, so what's your order?
Oh, do you want it in order as well?
Yeah. What, are you saying
Bagnaia,
Marquez for the win? Oh no, Bagnaia for
Marquez, Quartararo.
Okay. Oh, okay. All right. So Keith, Bagnaia, Marquez, Fabio Quartararo, Pete. So hang on, because you went in the reverse order. It was Bastianini, Rins
first.
Yeah.
No, Bastianini to win.
Yeah.
Rins second, Marquez third.
Marquez third. Okay.
We should probably just say, to win the title, Bagnaia's got to be top five this weekend. I mean, there's lots of combinations because Aleix and Quartararo are definitely still in play, and obviously Bastianini a bit. But Bagnaia, if he's outside the top five, it won't be decided this weekend. That's the first thing, really, at this stage for people watching to just remember. So he's got to be top five, and then he's got to score, 11 points more than Fabio, less than 2 from Aleix. So if Aleix wins, he'll take it to the final round.
There isn't one rider that wants to go to Valencia having to fight for a title. That is a horrible racetrack to have to fight for.
Imagine if they all crashed out. The Bastianini, Bagnaia, Fabio, and Aleix, and Bastianini wins. What does that do? Surely that elevates him right up there.
It would mean they would all four still be. I know Aleix because he's 27 points behind now,
done,
so he would actually
he?
drop out. Yeah. But Bastianini would stay in, so you still have three guys for the final round. But I mean, look, and the whole team orders thing, isn't it? Again, rewind to Sepang. Was it 2017? Dovi and Lorenzo, the mapping 8 message coming up on the dash. We were talking about dashboards earlier. So we know Ducati are willing to use team orders at the penultimate round. Yeah. What will they do this weekend? I mean, it's worked pretty well for them so far. These sort of not too hands-on, just kind of like, you can race for the win, but don't mess with Pecco too much. But this weekend, what will they say? Might they say, you know what, guys, you race for Ducati this weekend, Pecco gets the title, and then you do what you want at Valencia. They could sell it to them maybe like that. We don't know, and they're not going to tell us, of course.
You're kind of forgetting the teammates coming together almost at Miller Corner at Phillip Island. Bastianini nearly rammed Pecco up the backside. I mean, he had to get up on the pegs. I mean, he had to kind of pull the bike out from underneath him to miss the rear end of Bagnaia. So I think, honestly, I think Gigi and Davide are going to have a proper job managing them next year. Can't wait.
I mean, and to be honest, from Bagnaia's point of view, if Bastianini or Miller or someone ran away up front and took the 25 and the 20 points away from Quartararo, that's not the end of the world, is it, for Ducati? So, but how will they play it all? You were talking about the pressure of Bagnaia leading the championship. You've got Ducati riders that are sort of messing around a bit and unsure where to overtake. And then you've got guys like Marquez and Rins who don't care at all. Yeah, could be interesting on Sunday. And Quartararo's got to go for it. For me, Quartararo's got to get the whole shot and be like 0.8 of a second ahead to try and make up for the time you'll lose on the straights. And that's his only chance.
Well,
winning,
that's considerable as well. We've got 2 straights, one after another with a hairpin in the middle that are going to make the difference for Yamaha. And I think, my prediction of Quartararo being on the podium is one where he's chucked gunpowder shot at it, gunpowder bloody load at it, fired everything. He's got to chuck all caution to the wind at Sepang, otherwise he isn't going to be world champion.
Either way, you're going to want to watch it. You do not want to miss these last couple of MotoGP races. We're done, but we're going to be here as well for the last few races too. Make sure you tuned in, as always, across crash.net for all the very latest news and analysis across the week. And then we'll be back with you next week to discuss it all. Will we have a champion? It could well be crowned this weekend. Get your questions in, leave them in the comments section, or tweet, Instagram or Facebook us. Just search Crash MotoGP, and please do leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts as well. And we shall see you right back here next week. But from myself, Keith, and Pete, bye-bye.